In een villa even buiten Los Angeles woont Alan Curtis Kay, bijna 50 jaar oud. Hij werkt bij Apple en wordt wel de uitvinder van de personal computer genoemd. Al vroeg raakte hij geïnteresseerd in de communicatie tussen de mens en de machine, die niet altijd optimaal ontworpen is.
Well, I'm a person who's always been interested in design, and the whole interaction of how our minds work with our bodies through our visual senses and through our ability to capture things symbolically. That's what I've been interested in all my life.
Alan Kay geniet op dit moment van een sabbatical year. Alleen 's ochtends dan, want 's middags ontwikkelt hij nieuwe plannen om de computer nog eenvoudiger te maken. Met de uitvinding van de muis en het principe van de Windows maakte hij destijds de computer al voor veel mensen toegankelijker.
Just as far fewer people write well than are able to speak, writing is a little bit more artificial than reading, I think. You are forced to do it less often. The same thing with computer. You can use tools made by other people for a very long time, but then at some point you find something I wish it could do this, or I wish it could do that, and it's allowing people to be able to do that without having to become a professional programmer is my main interest.
Alan Kay, niet alleen gek op computers, maar ook op orgels, thuis of in de plaatselijke kerk. Van het keyboard van de computer naar het klavier van het orgel is voor hem maar een kleine stap.
Many computer scientists are musicians.
How come?
Because of the parallels, I think, between the two. Just as Einstein played violin, one of the things he drew from it were aesthetic feelings that he wanted to apply to mathematics and physics. And I think most of us computer scientists have the same kind of feeling, that we're looking for a kind of structure that is like the computer architectures we deal with.
Kay zou graag zien dat ook zakenmensen hun vaak nog afstandelijke houding ten opzichte van het medium laten varen.
Businessmen and educators have to look after their own interests, and they have to understand that the computer is a new piece of media. So it has the impact of the printing press, and those who were slow to adapt to what the printing press was all about were slow to get past the Renaissance and into Western civilization.
Een paar keer per week loopt Alan Kay langs het strand om ver weg van het drukke stadsgewoel in alle rust nieuwe ideeën op te doen.
Sometimes ideas pop into your head. And also the relaxed feeling of the beach is more the way I would like human-computer communication to be than tense and goal-oriented.
Of hij inderdaad nieuwe ideeën heeft opgedaan, zullen we nu horen. Dames en heren, hier is Alan Kay.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about computers and communication, two words that haven't often gone together in the past. It's sort of like airlines and food, or consulting and business. But the way we try and communicate with computers these days, the most successful ways have come about from trying to understand better what a computer is, not as a device for doing word processing, imitating paper in various ways, but to try and understand how it lies at the root of the human experience. What can we compare it to? Well, one thing I like to compare it to, and I'd like to go to the first slide here, is the book. We often think of a computer as a calculator, but in fact, the book, I think, is a closer way of thinking of it. A book is a piece of technology that contains marks that represent our ideas. And the marks can be about things that we think are true. They can be about things we'd like to think are true. For instance, this is a chapter about transforming a dead moon like our own into an Earth-like planet, and there are equations, and there's an argument in this book that says this could be done if we could make such and such an effect. And books contain ideas that are outside of the physical world and sometimes have to do with it. Now, if we look at a computer, one way of thinking about it is a computer is a book that can read and write itself. And so if we wanted to transform a moon into an Earth-like planet, and we were thinking about representing it on a computer, we wouldn't just represent what we wanted to do, we wouldn't just represent equations, we'd represent it as a dynamic simulation that actually tries to carry it out. And because of that, we get to understand our ideas and yearnings much better. Let's take a look at this as it's actually done on a computer. Let's look at the first video. So here we have our airless moon, and so the computer is big, very, very big. Computer art is not showing a picture, but showing a process. So those geological formations that you saw were actually being carried out using our best knowledge of how mountains and valleys are created on the Earth. So that was not a cartoon animation, but actually a representation, an illustration of the kind of simulation that computers are actually capable of. And it's in that light of looking at computers that I want to give the talk today. A second idea that I'd like to share with you is that most of our existence as human beings over the last several 100,000 years, we've had two major ways of extending ourselves. And the first way immediately comes to mind. Go to the next slide, please. I need to get my tie signal down. So we immediately think of tools like a screwdriver and a wheel, but we also have some mental tools like language and mathematics. And all of these tools I think of as extensions of the gesture. They help us manipulate things. They make them into little bits and pieces that we can then move around and make new combinations that may have new meanings that are useful for us. The second way that we've extended ourselves over the years is a little more subtle, but it's illustrated perfectly by this gathering, and that's that we extend our goal structures into other people. So we can, another person can act for us as an agent. So we can manipulate and carry out goals by doing it ourselves or by getting another human being to do it for us. And even better, an agent of ours can get other agents to do things. So if we want to work on something hard, we may have dozens of agents that are working with other agents. And for most of history, actually until just recently, this way of extending ourselves, of making machines, was the most dominant way. And the M word for that is management. So we have manipulation for tools, management with agents. Now, the problem with the mainframe computer when it came along is it didn't resemble either a tool or an agent, and so it was some complicated. It actually resembled an altar of a god cared for by priests in white coats and so forth, and it didn't feel like you could step up to it and use it either directly or by getting it to take on some of your goals. Now, a very pivotal year in the history of communicating with computers was 1968, when there were a number of systems that were very different. One of them was done by Douglas Engelbart in California, and let's take a look at what his system was like in 1968. Let's run that next So here he is in 1968. This is a picture that could be taken today. He's sitting in his office. He has a black on white screen. He has a mouse to point at things. And the system was more than just a text editor, as you see right now. Let's have some sound with this, please.
Go to produce, they get big. I'd like to say one branch only, and let me look just that low, and I see it. Oh, I can say I'd like to see one line only. I can see it. But there's another thing I can do. There's a root I said I have here. So here, I'm afraid I'll need a different picture of the view. So here's what I drew with a picture drawing capability here. It's a slight map if I start from work, and here's the route I seem to have to go to pick up all the materials. And that's my plan for getting home tonight. But if I want to, I can say, the library, what am I supposed to pick up there? I can just point to that, and oh, I see, overdue books and all. Well, there was a statement there with that name on it. Go back. What am I supposed to pick up at the drugstore? I see, very interesting. All right. Market can do things if I want to just say, I'd like to interchange produce and canned materials. Bingo. And they're all numbered rightly if I care to look. Interchanging them very quickly. Cans are going to get interchanged with produce. They do it and all gets renumbered.
So that vision could have been shot yesterday. Even so, there are very few computers today that can do the kind of hypermedia, hypertext stuff that you saw there. So this is a complete vision of what I call the personal computer, desktop machine with a pointing device, a use of the machine other than just imitating flat paper, completely modern in every way. And for me, back then, it led to a machine design and that looked like this. This is one of the very first tabletop computers for very special tables. This machine weighed about 200 kilograms. And it had so many components in it that it had a fan that was likened to a 747 taking off. But for special tables made out of steel, this was a tabletop computer. And the problem with it was that it had really good function, but it wasn't easy to use. And in fact, we never even thought about the idea of computers being easy to use. At least I never did until I built this machine. This is what it looked like on its own display, by the way. So you can see what people were thinking about back in 1967 and 68. Well, that very same year, a couple of new systems also appeared that were very different. One of them was done at Rand Corporation for people who were not computer scientists. In fact, they didn't even like to type. They said, we hate typing. We're used to putting our ideas on paper and moving them around and everything. Can't you do something about that? And that led to the invention of the first really good high-resolution tablet, and it looked like this.
First, we erase a flow arrow, then move the connector out of the way so that we may draw a box in its place.
So he drew a square. It saw he wanted a rectangle. It made one. Now it's recognizing his handwriting.
The box is being used as commentary only in this case. The box is slightly too large, so we may change its size.
Here's where modern-day window control came from.
Then draw a flow from the connector to the box. Attach a decision element to the box and draw a flow from it to scan. We then erase the flow arrows attached to the process post new area and move the box to a new position. This allows us to draw a new box.
So forth. No menus, no function keys, every command given as an analogy to the thing you actually wanted to appear there. Well, I had a chance to use this in 1968 and felt just like I was pushing my hands right through the glass of the display and touching the structures directly underneath. Felt completely different from Engelbart's system, and I had to call it intimate. I felt like I was dealing directly with the information I was trying to work with. There were less barriers there. And the other thing that happened that year was the first flat screen display, a little 1-inch square piece of glass that could show a few dots on it. And that led to this image cardboard model I made in 1968, which I called the Dynabook. Dynamic book, so portable you can carry other things too. Something that you would always have with you, connected into the world of information continuously using digital cellular and so forth. A dream machine, but of a very different type, an intimate type. And much of what has happened in the last 21 years has had to do with playing out these two ways of using computers. In the first way I showed you, we were using the mouse for pointing at things. The machine was showing us what it was doing, and it was reacting to us. It was reacting to things that we did. We had it do things, so we were watching it. Tools are something that you watch and manipulate. In the second case, the system was watching us. It was trying to see what we were trying to do as we were fumbling around trying to make drawings, and then it would recognize those drawings as goals we were trying to achieve and achieve those goals for us. So in the second case, the system watched us. And the difference between tools and agents is in tools, we watch them, and in agents, they watch us. They try and fit closer to us. So what I'd like to do is to... 3 ways in 1968 existed for thinking about communication with computers, and one of the ways of characterizing it is just where is the computer that you use. Yesterday, it was in somebody else's computer room. It was like a railroad. Somebody else made the schedules, decided what you could do with it. Today, for most of us, the computer is on our desk, and tomorrow, the computer is going to be wherever we are. In California, we'll weave it into our T-shirts. The computer of tomorrow won't have an on-off switch. It'll be something really useful, like a clock that we'd never think of turning off, because it, even when we're not directly working with it, is going to be working for us all the time because it can take on our goal structures. Another way of thinking about how do we measure performance on computers? On time-sharing systems, it was how long does it take to get a response back from the main computer. Today, on a desktop computer, we think of how many millions of instructions can it carry out for us. And tomorrow, none of those things will be important. The computer of 1995 will have 25 to 50 times the computing power of the machines that we have today. All we'll worry about tomorrow is, through the global networks that are now being set up, will we be able to access, to find the information and tools that we need to advance our goals. This change is going to be as profound as the change from the mainframe to the desktop computer. What kinds of data do we work with? Well, just letters and numbers on the mainframe for the most part. On a Macintosh, it's fonts and 2D graphics. Tomorrow, it's going to be all media, and we'll see an example of that from the last speaker today. Feel of interaction feels like editing on a 3270 screen. On a Macintosh, it feels like layout because we're moving things around. But tomorrow, it's going to feel like orchestration or conducting because we aren't going to be dealing with passive objects anymore, but active ones that are trying to find what it is that we want to do. How do we issue commands? On the institutional computer, we had to remember and type, and still do for people who buy them. Macintosh, it's see and point. It always shows us what it's willing to do next. But tomorrow, we'll go from personal to intimate. Intimate communication is through gesture, asking, telling, and so forth. And a lot of what I want to say today has to do with that transition. Now, another idea is that functionality, which people think they're paying money for on computers, is actually not very worthwhile. If I gave you a screwdriver like this, you'd be very angry at me. Yet this is the functional part of it. Functionality needs a user interface, and the result is a tool. A tool is a function plus a user interface. And if you don't have either one, you don't have a tool. Now with agents, we use the word functionality. Here's one that knows how to use a screwdriver and a drill. And again, we need a user interface, language and context, as the first 3 speakers have talked about quite a bit, to have the idea of that the screw is a good place to use the screwdriver, and the result is an agent. So functionality plus context and language gives us an agent. So in both cases, we have the problem of how do we find a reasonable user interface. Now, like the earlier speakers, I believe that language basically has to do with trying to agree on some context that we both share. So here are two people, each with a thought cloud. They overlap on to be or not to be in the screwdriver, but the one on the left is a mathematician and a physicist, and the one on the right is a musician. And they would have a very hard time communicating, because communication, just as I'm trying to do with you today, is not the result of just telling you in English or any other language, because language itself does not carry much meaning. What language is an extension of the gesture. What I'm really trying to do is to point to something in my thought cloud that I hope is in your thought clouds, and if it is, then we are communicating. And of course, the difficulty with communicating with computers is they don't have much in their thought clouds. Now, there are two ways around that, and I'll show them to you. In order to work with this, we have to have some sort of understanding of the human mind, and the problem is that nobody really understands how it works. It's extremely difficult. Most of the common sense notions about how humans work, like a common sense notion, for example, is I am a single I. I'm a unity. I am a unitary mentality. Just me there. But in fact, it doesn't quite work that way. Consider this. Now, take a look at this, and please don't be shy. Tell me what you see is wrong with this picture. Who can see it? Mouth is upside down, and what else? Anybody see it? Let's pretend we're in school, so I'm going to tell you in English a fact about this. And so a description in English of this is we've taken a photograph of a young girl, extracted her eyes and mouth, turned them upside down, put them back into the picture, and then turned the entire picture upside down. Now you know everything about this picture, because I just told you, so you shouldn't be at all surprised when I show you what it looks like right side up. Now I'm going to move this back because I've discovered nobody will listen to me when it's on the other way. Now, these are the kinds of things that perceptual psychologists really love. Feminists don't, sorry. I'll give you equal time later. The important idea here is that I presented the same information twice. Once through language, went through your ears into a part of your brain that processes language, and it thought about it, said, okay, that's a fairly reasonable statement that he made. It's like, and the other way, when I showed it to you, it went through the visual part of your nervous system and was processed in a completely different way. Produced a startling reaction, because if you see something like the face that I showed you, your nervous system built in, just as the first speaker is talking about, this is a built-in reaction. See something like this might mean you're going to die in the next 10 seconds. It works for most mammals, so it's built in, and so if you try this experiment on a dog, I suggest you pick a small one. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that our mentalities are actually composed of separate modules. The modules are often tied to the senses, but they can be tied to other things. The modules came about for different evolutionary reasons. They think about the world differently, they take in information differently, and they occasionally oppose each other. So I can't see out in the audience too well, but could I see the hands of all the tennis players that are here? Okay, how many people learn to play a set of tennis with forehand, backhand, and overhand serve in a week? Okay, how many did it in a day? How many did it in 20 minutes? Now, why is tennis hard? Or is it? Seems to be. The pros like us to pay them for many tennis lessons. You can take the lights down now, thanks. In fact, a challenge was issued a few years ago to a fellow who wrote a book that says tennis is actually quite easy. Anybody can learn to play a decent game of tennis in a single afternoon if they don't try too hard. Now, of course, he was from California. We don't try on anything. And a newscaster got very upset at this and decided to try and expose him. So he sent a television team out to show the world that this was ridiculous. And the television people rounded up 35 people who had never played tennis before. They signed legal affidavits. And they took them all out in the court, found the worst one, who was a 55-year-old lady, 40 pounds overweight, 5'2", and a muumuu. And she had the muumuu because she had not even exercised for 20 years, did not even have sports clothes. They had to buy her sneakers to get her out in the court. And then in front of the rest of the people and live television, they said to this tennis teacher, all right, you have 20 minutes. We can't give you a complete afternoon. This is television after all. You have 20 minutes to teach her how to play tennis on live television. I want to show you what happened here, and in the context of which we're talking about, let's see if we can understand what's actually going on here. So let's roll that next clip.
I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know, I need someone help.
I haven't done anything physical in like 20 years. I could just picture myself as like just chasing balls all the time, you know, never hitting it, just chasing it. And I'd heard about the inner game, but I really didn't think it would work with me. As a matter of fact, I had called yesterday to cancel it because I thought it'd be hopeless, but I was talked into coming.
I'm going to have Tim hit some balls to me, and as the ball flies through the air, I want you just to watch it. In the very instant the ball hits the court, I want you to say bounce. And the very instant the ball hits the racket, I want you to say hit. So you just be saying bounce, hit. All you need to do is watch the ball, okay?
Bounce, hit.
The key of all the exercises in the inner game is to focus the mind's attention somewhere where it will not interfere with the body's ability to hit the ball automatically. You stand here and Tim will throw you a couple. And you just continue doing the same thing.
Should I try to hit it?
Not at first. At first, just say bounce when the ball bounces and hit when you would hit it, but don't hit it. Then after you feel like hitting it, go ahead and hit it.
Okay. Bounce, hit. Bounce, hit. Bounce, hit. Bounce, hit.
Okay. When a player is first learning the game of tennis, and when he says bounce, he's also, out of the corner of his eye, watching me hit the ball. So even though he's not trying to see how I hit it, the image of me hitting it is going right into his memory. You enjoying yourself?
Yeah, it's really fun.
You like that? Okay, here you go.
I love it.
The cardinal principle in any book written on tennis, about tennis, is to watch the ball. No tennis player really sees the ball enough. And the reason is they get bored. So I try to give them something to see in the ball that's interesting. So we watch the trajectory of the ball, the gracefulness of the line made by the balls that fly through the air. You might start listening to the ball, Molly. Listen to how it sounds on your racket. Hear that?
Yes.
Hear that one? What does that sound like?
Very dull.
It was like wood. That's how wood sounds. Keep listening and you'll hear the sound that you like pretty soon. Just listen to it. Okay, now listen on this side. Now the girl. Okay. Now feel where that racket is part of your arm. That's it. Just feel it. Don't try so hard. Let it happen. That's it. Do what's comfortable, Molly.
every time I did start to think, things went wrong. When you just stop thinking, the body seems to know what to do.
Now, I'll tell you what, Molly. We're going to do one other stroke now. And this one's called the serve. And the serve is just like a dance. It's just like a dance. We'll come back here and I'll show you how to do a dance called the serve. Okay? And I've done this dance a little bit, so I'll just do it. Okay. Da-da-da. In fact, you can start humming if you want.
Okay.
The rhythm, like this. Watch this. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Out loud.
Da-da-da.
Okay, now, here's what you do. I want you to stand there, shut your eyes, and imagine yourself doing that same dance. You might start humming a little bit. Da, da. As you're doing it, yeah. Okay, now what I want you to do is no thinking, just go do it, quick. Just no thinking, just go serve, yeah. Serve, fine, don't worry about missing. Keep serving, don't think. Go, do, quick, that's it.
Down.
Fine, again, don't worry about hitting it.
Down.
Out loud, let's hear it. Out loud, the rhythm.
Down.
There you go. I get them to hum the rhythm of my serve. So they're not thinking, oh, this is what he's doing with his elbow, this is what he's doing with his hands. They're not trying to remember all that. They start humming. And they see themselves doing very similar things, muscular movements, to what I did. But they're not thinking about it, so it just comes out naturally and fluidly. So that didn't take long. That's called serving. Out.
Out.
Don't miss it. Sit. Come. Okay? Okay, that's your first point in tennis. Score is 15 love.
Fantastic. Amazing.
Okay, Molly. No need for you to miss.
All of a sudden, everything became effortless. I was just sort of like floating along, and doing what came naturally, and I said, I'm playing tennis. It's really, really beautiful.
Have a clear idea of what you want, then let it happen. Don't try too hard. I'm going to try to make you miss, Molly, because it's going on too long. So I'll just get a little bit harder. You just keep watching the ball. Keep watching it. They're rooting for you, Mom. Don't be distracted. Keep on that ball. Oh, Molly, that's fine. That's called tennis.
Well, that happened many years ago, and it was the key to the work we've been doing at the Xerox Research Center on trying to develop a new way for people to communicate with computers. Why shouldn't learning a computer be like that? Why shouldn't... And what did we learn from that? Well, we saw from the two faces that we have a visual mentality. We have a symbolic mentality that processes language. We saw here that we have a kinesthetic mentality. When we appeal directly to these mentalities, then we can get tremendous results. And yet, none of these mentalities covers the whole world. One of the big problems in most human relations, particularly in business, is people try and do everything with language of the symbolic kind, and yet there are other ways to solve problems, come up with new ideas, and so forth. So let me show you how we turned that into something that is very successful today. Let's show the next clip, please. This is about 1974. And here's the forerunner of both the Macintosh and all workstations today. A little bit bigger. but very powerful, about 3 times the power of a Macintosh or a 386 computer. It's also playing the music. And we did all this stuff by working with children, because children force us to think of new ideas. And the way we combine the 3 mentalities, this is a tool built by a child, is to combine doing with images concretely to make symbols. Okay, and let's roll the next clip. Here's the result. And this is a 22-month-old young girl. She's 2 months before her 2nd birthday. Both of her parents own a Macintosh. Their parents work at home. And when I discovered she was interested in computers, I gave her an Apple II, which she rejected. She wanted a Mac just like her folks. This little girl has never lived in a world not densely populated by computers like the Macintosh, so she doesn't know that computers are difficult. This is part of her environment. And because of the way it's set up, it appeals directly to her innate ability to deal with her environment. Now, even though we designed this stuff for a very young child, I was amazed at how youngest was about 5. Here she is, not yet 2, dealing very confidently with the situations here. But still, it's not too remarkable. Of course, she can point at visible icons and make things happen. What happened next, though, really amazed me. She wants a fresh sheet of paper, so she goes up to the close box on the window, saves her old drawing using the pop-up, and then using the pull-down, gets herself a new sheet of paper, and she's off and running again. Now, what does all this mean? It doesn't mean that all of the fundamental problems of communication have been solved in something like the Macintosh, but it shows what a fantastic advance can be made simply by going back to the human being as a creature who is much more complicated than we'd like to believe, but in which we're starting to understand that we're created with a kinesthetic way of knowing things, a visual way of knowing things, a symbolic way of knowing things. If we can combine those together, then we'll be able to work our way into the future, no matter how scary it seems to be. And as always, when we're going and exploring into a place we haven't been before, the best weapon we have to do it is the one between our ears, providing it's loaded. Thank you very much. Thank you.